Mary Sue in Chicago, Edja in Chicago, Kyra in Oak Park. We've got Evanston. We've got Prescott, Arizona, Princeton, New Jersey, Beverly Shores, Indiana. This is so exciting. Columbus, Ohio. Wonderful. Pilsen Little Village. Thank you so much, Gracie, for being here. Evelyn in Waukegan. We've got Jess from Hyde Park. Thanks for being here. Catherine alone with her dog. Thanks so much for joining us. Great. Let's keep the check-ins coming. We want to hear from all of you. But for now, I'll just get us moving forward because we have a packed agenda and we can't wait to jump in with you. So I'm Anna Garcia Doyle. I'm the Executive Director of the One Earth Film Festival. I want to welcome you to our virtual screening and discussion, which we hope will present rich opportunities for learning and provide a brave and safe space for important conversations that matter deeply right now in our country and across the globe. What really hit home for me in both of today's films is the idea of sacrifice zones, where lives are sacrificed for the interests and profits of the few and the powerful. One young activist in District 15 is asked why she doesn't just move or get out. She says, "I don't want to leave the problems, I want to fix it." One activist in Reclamation, The Rise at Standing Rock, says with resolve, "We don't have to take it anymore." I don't want to move ahead any further without taking the opportunity to thank our wonderful sponsors and partners, without whom we could not do this work. So thank you to WBEZ 91.5 Chicago and Vocalo, the Garfield Park Conservatory Alliance, Senator Don Harmon, Race Conscious Dialogues, and Environmentalists of Color. Two other quick notes. At the end of this event, please share your experiences on the survey linked to at the top of your video window so One Earth can keep improving what we do. And if your circumstances allow, please donate to support One Earth's nonprofit, year-round screening events, youth programs, and more at oneearthfilmfest.org. We are thrilled you're with us as One Earth Film Fest celebrates 10 years of inspiring change and utilizes the power of film to spark change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like social justice. The fest has had to adapt to a virtual format, but we strive to stay true to our model. While we're not physically together, we are here together, live, virtually, still able to create community, become aware of issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. African-American activist Angela Davis said, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world." The stories in our fest films reflect that possibility. Our collective actions will achieve that possibility. Our event will take place in 4 parts. We'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a great discussion after the film. We'll then watch it together. Then afterwards, we'll unpack the film's themes in a facilitated Q&A with our wonderful panelists. Please participate by using the chat to share thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These actions come from our panelists and other action partners. As we live current movements and reframe narratives around justice, environment, and bringing innovative, equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we're hopeful for the future. I am grateful to the knowledgeable filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. They'll guide discussions to help spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. We've found that shared agreements help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe these agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect. Engage your active listening, use I statements and get comfortable with your own story. Acknowledge Native peoples who came before us in protecting our land. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people this is happening. Amplify these voices and be part of the community we're building here together. The hashtag for the festival is hashtag OEFF2021. Thanks again to all of you for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
My name is Kyra Woods, and I am our Chicago Clean Energy Advocate with Sierra Club. I am here in the Chicagoland area, in the Chicago area, and grew up on the far south side. Really grateful to be joining you all in the virtual space. Whether you're here in Chicago or as far as Oregon or will tune in from abroad, these are really some fantastic films to reflect on. We often watch movies and then leave the theaters without really reflecting on what we've seen or how it's making us feel. And sometimes those really, really moving films or pieces of art are the ones that stay with us. And I'm sure that these two films will do just that. And so today we actually want to make space to have that reflection, to have a deep conversation, thought-provoking dialogue about what has been sparked in your heart and in your mind when you watch District 15 and Reclamation, The Rise at Standing Rock. Gratefully, we will be joined by fantastic, committed panelists, and we will also have a chance to talk with our filmmakers after the film as well. I'm going to just briefly introduce our panelists at the top of our program, but of course it will be joining us in our post-film program as well. And I hope that you will truly stick around for that dialogue, and you'll join us also via our chat box. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists for this afternoon. And thank you for that feedback, Karen, because we want to make sure that our audience can be engaged this whole time. We have Angela Tovar, who's our Chief Sustainability Officer at the City of Chicago. She's joining us as well. Hey there, Angela. And then we will also have Naomi Davis, the founder and president of Blacks in Green, joining us. Fantastic. Great to see you, Naomi. Before we watch our two films, we hope that you'll enjoy this short piece titled Fighting for Environmental Justice, the Health Crisis at the U.S.-Mexican Border. It's directed by our Young Filmmakers Contest winner, Sally Stovall. And she actually, it's from our Young Filmmakers Contest this year in 2021. And it's the winner of the Sally Stovall Award for activism. And so, Miss Ilan, we really am grateful that you are sharing your film with us. Ilan Jinic is a sophomore at the San Diego Jewish Academy in San Diego, California. Okay. It is also my pleasure to invite our two panelists to the conversation, our two filmmakers, actually, Anjali Nayar, the director of District 15, and Michele Noble, the director of Reclamation, The Rise at Standing Rock. There we are. We've got Anjali and Michele there on the screen. They'll introduce their films to us and know that one will play immediately after the other. So I'm going to toss it to you, Anjali, and then after your film intro, Michele, can you tell us about your piece?
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'm sorry that we're not all together in person and sharing the same space. District 15 is an area that's not very far from where I live here in Los Angeles, the Wilmington area of Southeast LA. The film is about a group of young people who are fighting against big oil in their neighborhoods. It's an issue that's across the states. It's a small issue. It's a big issue. It's the issue that's going to change the course of this country and the course of the planet. So I don't want to speak too much more about the film as a whole, but I hope to join you in the question and answer period afterwards.
Hi, I'm Michele Noble, and my film is Reclamation, The Rise at Standing Rock. Standing Rock was a transformative experience for me, as it was for everyone who stood at Standing Rock for the Native nations uniting for the first time in 150 years, and their peaceful resistance to the Dakota Access Pipeline. And this is the pipeline is an ongoing issue. There's Line 3 and so many other things. And I'm really excited to be part of this discussion and for you to see the film and for us to talk about where we are with big oil.
Fantastic. So really having these two pieces will allow us to look at the conversation around energy justice and the broader conversation around environmental justice. Thank you both. And thank you also to our other panelists, Angela and Naomi, who will be joining us afterwards as well. All right, without any further ado, I will pass it off to our, our team to get our films loaded and playing. We hope that you enjoy the films, and be sure to join us afterwards also to hear from our filmmakers and our panelists in our post-film conversation. See you soon. Wonderful. I'd encourage us all to just come back for a moment. This is like the moment in the theaters where the lights come back on. But those are both two really moving pieces in our first short from our YFC contest. Truly, truly, truly thought-provoking. So I encourage us all to just come back to our bodies, and as we're gathering thoughts, I know some things are happening in the chat. I encourage you to share what are some of the scenes and people or lines from the film that you remember. And as we share some of these ideas in the chat, I encourage you also to go ahead and grab a snack, do the moving around you need to, because in just a bit, we're going to call our panelists and our directors back to the screen for a conversation. So seeing some things in the chat now. Oh yeah, you guys are picking up some great things. From District 15, I think Jody shared insidious tactics to buy the silence of the community. Two powerful films that show that collective voices are strong and resilient to the violence. Thanks so much, Aaron and Jody, for those. That the most important resource is not oil, it's us. That also came from District 15. Some comments from Reclamation. Ernie shared from LaDonna, I said, why are you here? She said, we came here because the prayer is here to save the water. Absolutely. Water is life as well from Ernie. Maple shared no Dapple, no line 3, no MVP. Yes, absolutely. All right, we'll keep those coming in. Julie shared, I will remember the faces of the young leaders. Absolutely, absolutely. And as we're reflecting on these films, I'm sure that many of you, whether you're here in Chicago or in other places, these scenes or these conversations, these lines may mirror what may be going on in your community as well. So I know that I'm definitely experiencing a bit of that as somebody who's grown up in this city, but also recognizing that this is the original caretakers of this land, including those of the Three Fires Confederacy and other indigenous groups, are still here. And so very frequently, as we tell the history of lands and of policies and changes, we're not always sensitive to those communities who are here first and who are still here. Yeah, and to be caretakers of our sacred land, a mantra and a motto and a goal for all. Absolutely. Great. Well, at this point, I'd also like to be sure to invite our panelists and our directors to the conversation as well. I want to make sure, I know we did some brief introductions earlier, but I want to take this moment to actually give a little bit deeper of an introduction to everybody. Anjali Nayar, who's our director of District 15, is an environmental scientist and filmmaker based in Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us and for allowing your film to be shown in this festival, Anjali. We're really looking forward to talking to you further. Next, I'll pull up to the screen Michele Noble, who's the director of Reclamation, The Rise at Standing Rock. Michele is an award-winning writer, producer, and director of narrative and documentary films. And those films and those narrative pieces generally center around social justice issues. And we definitely saw that today. Thanks, Michele. Also, I'm going to bring back Angela Tovar, who's our Chief Sustainability Officer with the City of Chicago. Angela has been appointed by Mayor Lori Lightfoot to that office, and we are really grateful for her leadership and the direction that she is moving forward with things. And lastly, but definitely not least, Naomi Davis, founder and president of Blacks in Green. Blacks in Green, or lovingly here known as BIG, because they are doing big things, is a nonprofit born to reinvent the community economy, right? What does it really mean to have an opportunity to build communities that are walk to shop, walk to work, walk to play? And Naomi and her leadership is taking this moment as we talk about a climate crisis, but really seeing this as an opportunity to level the playing field for communities that need it most, and particularly the Black community here in Chicago. So really, really grateful to have the four of you with us today. I want to share the question that we shared with our audience first. What are your general reflections? Are there scenes or lines that are still resonating with you?
Well, I'll jump off one that was put in the chat by my great colleague, environmental activist and lobbyist Nicole Salisbury, also of Sierra. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Oh,
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Michele, Anjali, and Angela.
Yeah, I think during production, there was a couple moments that really stood out to me, but the first reason and why I made the film was that I was taken on one of these like toxic tours by the youth activists of CBE, and just standing there, and there are a few of these scenes in the film that are quite near to the refineries. We were standing there and they presenting maybe for 15 minutes, surrounded by houses, residential areas, and so on. And later that evening, 15 minutes having spent there, later that evening, I had a migraine for 2 days because I could smell it. Everybody that was on the tour could smell it. This combination of like toxic and then these like masking agents that are really weirdly sweet. But nobody in the community, none of these young kids could smell it. And it was one of the things that wasn't until the end of the filming period, that I actually related to them that this had happened, because I thought, if you can't smell that you're being poisoned on a daily, what injustice is that? Like that you can't even know that this is happening to you. But anybody walking into that situation would be able to feel that and know that it is bad for them. So that was one of the things that kind of struck me. And I know it doesn't come out from the images themselves, but just knowing what I felt in that moment and how hard it was for me, and how much guilt and how much everything that came up in that moment will always stay with me when I see those images back.
I mean, I think for me, it was also, I was at Standing Rock from early on, and when there was only a handful to all the way to the end, when there was 15,000 strong from all over the world. So for me, it was that group, that initial group of young women, and also with LaDonna Bravebowl, who had come together to say that they wanted it to stop, that they were going to stand no matter what, and that they had buried several of their friends from suicide. And LaDonna spoke in the doc about she was aware that the pipeline's route was going through her son's grave. And it was in this moment that I realized, having been invited to bear witness, to film, to participate, that I realized this is so personal, and this is, and the pipeline just completely took all the maps that the Native folks had with where the burial sites and ceremonial sites had been, where they presented to the court where everything was. And then the next day they just plowed through every single 380 sites. So not only was this like the unification of the Native nations, but also the examination of the treaty land and the treaty rights, and also bringing in the environment and exactly how the pipeline affects the leaking of and contamination. So for me, when I see the doc, I remember those early moments of this, steadfast group of Native young people who just said, that's enough, stop. And from that, you get the awakening of the world. So,
and to that point, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead, Naomi.
Okay. And to that point, I was also deeply moved by one of the activists who talked about really after they have come together after hundreds of years of conflict and alienation, that they recognize that, yeah, they were there for a fight for what mattered to them physically and in spiritually, but also they were there to find themselves as themselves, as a people.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's why when I was really thinking of how to frame what they were experiencing, the reclamation aspect to me, when they told me about this and the forgiveness ceremonies, I thought was amazing. One of the words that we heard most at camp was the word of freedom, because the design of the of the reservation is one of isolation and containment. So to have that many Native nations all come together, they were free. They remembered freedom at that point, and so, and also, they also remembered the old ways and the ancestors and how they were before colonization. So it was intense.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Angela, I want to make sure that you can share your reflections too.
Thank you, Kyra. I think I lost my connection for a second, so I'm glad to be back on, and I apologize if I missed some of the conversation here. I mean, I was struck by so many things, and I think that first and foremost, I am just so grateful that these two important stories are part of the film festival, right? And that these stories are being uplifted, and the stories of the folks that are in these fights, right, are being uplifted. I want to commend the directors and everyone that shares the stories of folks that are on the front lines. I think in these types of conversations have been left out of the traditional mainstream environmental conversation too often, right? And I think that we need to do a better job of bringing those stories forward. And I'm glad that we're here today talking about these two communities. For me, I think it was something very simple that that was said. I think in District 15, there was a comment made by one of the young folks who said, "The power that you have is real," right? And it was just that simple comment that I think should be underscored over and over again. There are so many communities throughout the country and the world, right? Anna, in her intro, used the term sacrifice zones, right? And we know that as typically low-income communities and communities of color who bear a disproportionate environmental burden as a result of some of these very extractive practices. And those are communities that, as a result of that, have disproportionate environmental conditions and public health concerns, right, in their communities. And we have seen just this movement from Wilmington, to Standing Rock, to here in the Midwest, in Chicago, to New York, to the island of Vieques here in this country. All of these towns and cities and people just really at the forefront of these fights, acknowledging that these impacts are there, that they are that these sacrifice zones, right? That this is rooted in environmental racism and historic disinvestment, and that people are here to say, look, we want a choice here. We have the solution, we have the lived experience, and we want our voice to be valued in this process, right? And I think that it's so powerful to hear these stories and to be a part of that, right? And so I was just moved by both of these stories for that reason.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
to Angela's point, that just really simple statement, that the power that you have is real. We're on the southeast side of Chicago here. We are recognizing that, and also to that Angela Davis quote that you have to, can't say it exactly, but you have to act or speak as if you have the power to change everything, or whatever the quote was. But you have to come into bring yourself forth as a warrior. That was the Sitting Bull quote, that you are there to sacrifice of yourself for the greater good of your community and your people. And right now we had the hunger strikers from the Chicago Environmental Justice Network protesting, putting their well-being on the line, that, the EPA permitting as of right, that we find the strength and the legislative levers to change that well-established practice in our communities, that you can do harm, have the harm documented, and come and move into our neighborhoods and do it all over again. So I'm deeply impressed with the wisdom of those young people who were like, I'm putting it all on the line. I love my people. No one said this was going to be a round trip. That's some serious stuff, because, we're living in the age of, we're in COVID now, and we know that, we have this familiarity with death now that we mostly don't have. So yeah, it is a beautiful thing to see that spirit, because it fortifies us here on the southeast side of Chicago for the work that we must do as we enter an age of a new master plan for the city of Chicago. A new master plan for the city of Chicago. How do we plan a higher road forward and eliminate these sacrifice zones?
Well, and it's a story that is visible in Chicago as well as in other cities, right? In other states and other countries as well. The concept of a sacrifice zone isn't limited to our domestic land at all, and has these rippling ramifications. But I really appreciate these pieces that you all are highlighting related to policy as well as things being personal, right? The conversation around environmental justice and the passion and power that we see on the streets or in city council or at the national stage is because this is both personal and requires policy change because of just how some things have been set up. And I appreciate how Anjali and Michele, you showed that through your films. Anjali, by taking us along from the pizza party and organizing meeting to city council with these students. And then Michele, as we have this conversation around treaties and saying, here is the map, here are our cultural sites, burial grounds, and the sorts. This is our agreement with the US government. And to see that simply disregarded speaks to how this is both policy oriented and as well as very personal. And sometimes people try to say, don't take it personally, right? I think Anjali, was it one of the city council members in the film who said, you can't just tell your bad neighbor goodbye. You can't kick them out. Would you mind telling us a bit more about what that experience was with the students who were very moved by this personal experience, but now given a platform in this policy space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't want to say that, I experienced their growth as a whole. I definitely stepped into the storytelling when these youth activists were fully formed, like amazing, powerful young women. So I acknowledge that. Like part of that is like story arc and how it plays out in a film. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I think you've also just like the previous couple of comments seeing these young people being so able to stand up there and speak to people in city council and speak to representatives and so on. And as soon as they feel comfortable standing aside and allowing, one other young person to do the same, and they each, pass that along, and it's building the voices from that community from, being very top heavy or, having a kind of structure that for an organization that might be very hierarchical, and just giving everybody an opportunity to find their voice. So I found that extremely, inspiring. I think the other thing that was just so inspiring, and it goes back to, I think, Naomi, what you were saying, and Angela, what you were saying is the power, and that this is real, and that you have it within you. And these are things that we often feel when we're young, and kind of erodes away as we get older and have been, brutalized by the realities of life so many times. And that was what was so kind of enlightening and wonderful to be a part of as this film, because I think we all need a little reminder that it is possible, and that if we, do our job, and you do your job, and the other person does their job, then collectively we can change the world. And that's literally the only way that will happen, is if we all feel like we have that power within us. So taking a kind of little note from our main characters in District 15 and applying that wisdom, the wisdom that we've lost, was really powerful for me, and really wonderfully inspiring for my own work.
But Kyra, to your point about you can't just tell your neighbor to move, well, actually you can. There are public health studies that well document the harm, and the role of government is to step in on behalf of the greater good of the public and say, you know what? You don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded theater, and you don't have the right to move your factory down to a community and shoot out pollutants willy-nilly just because you're on private property. That's the whole function of public policy, is to decide, how we are going to benefit, whom we are going to benefit, why we're going to benefit the people. So,
yeah. Well, and this theme of power, I'm sure we will not. It's a word that all four of you are very familiar with and likely grapple with in different ways as you tell stories, as you live the story, right? Even thinking about how some power holders have even forgotten how they can actually be that change, Sometimes the status quo may lead somebody to say, yeah, we just don't do that, but you can. And if you feel like you can't, that's also the problem. Like if you've forgotten the power that you have and you're not willing to enact it, then for what? I realize I have not invited our audience members to also share your questions. I know I see some of them coming in, but I do want to explicitly say, please drop your questions in the chat. We've got a few more minutes for this conversation, and I will do my best to at least capture a few and ask a few. One question that I think is just good for us all, and so I would encourage anybody to answer rather, is what does environmental or energy justice look like to you? What would you like to see happen? And I recognize that we're not all in the same city, but what are those next steps that you would like to see for a more just energy space? Angela, you look like you're ready to answer.
I am. And I think that, this is such a timely question for the city, for all of us here in the city of Chicago. We are at a very pivotal moment here where we are, we passed a resolution, as you know, Kyra, you were instrumental in that in 2019, committing the city to 100% renewable for its municipal buildings by 2025 and 100% renewable citywide by 2030. 2020, I'm sorry, 35, right? Sorry, and then 2040 for electrification of our buses, the CTA. We are also, so that has been moved ahead, right? We issued an RFP for a new energy supply contract with the city. And a requirement of that was that 50% of that has to come from renewable new build generation right here. And so we are in the procurement process. I can't say any more about that, but that is really creating the ecosystem, right, that we are looking for as a solution to energy justice, right, as an energy justice movement, right. Secondly, we are, for the first time in 30 years, negotiating our franchise agreement as the city of Chicago. So that's the agreement that gives our utility the right of way to be able to exist here, that their infrastructure can be set up in the city of Chicago. And so typically, that document has been signed purely from an infrastructure lens, right? Saying, okay, let's negotiate things here, the logistics, how does this get set up? How does this function? It hasn't really been thought about how do we tie that to a parallel agreement that achieves our policy priorities as people in the city of Chicago. And the other thing that's important right now is that we recently launched our strategy to move toward decarbonization, starting first with our built environment, just acknowledging here that the built environment is the source for 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions here in the city. So this is a moment where all of these things are coming together and will really design, right, and outline what the clean energy, renewable energy economy looks like for the city of Chicago. And so to me, that is rooted in justice, right? And I think that one thing that Naomi and I talk about quite frequently when we're together and we're brainstorming is one, we have to acknowledge that there has been harm done, right? That the fossil fuel economy, like we've seen in these films, have brought forth really extractive practices that have hurt people. And that acknowledgement means that we need to ensure that our solutions reverse that, right? And that repair that and heal our communities. And I think we heard a lot about healing, particularly in the Standing Rock film. Secondly, we talk quite a bit about how we build out that ecosystem, that thriving ecosystem for our communities. So if we're prepared to make an investment at this scale, right, what does that mean for people in our communities, right? What does that mean for everything from as simple as household savings all the way to opportunities for ownership, right? And for decision-making power and everything in between, right? There's a whole gamut of things that are possibilities within that. And so for me, it's understanding what those harms are, identifying opportunities to heal and to move forward, and to really say, okay, let's build out this thriving ecosystem in coordination with people who have this lived experience and that understand how their community will benefit from this clean energy economy moving forward. And let's build those solutions together.
Yeah, that's all spot on. And I did see a question, I believe it was from Janice, who had a curiosity a bit more about your job and the responsibilities and role that you could play in this space. So thank you for sharing that in such detail. And then I also see from the chat, Patty asked a question about why not require refineries or other pollutants to clean up their pollution or their emissions or their spills. I don't know, Anjali, if you have any, or actually even Michele as well, were there any conversations with either of the groups that you engaged with about what groups wanted to see in terms of that healing, in terms of that restoration, moving forward with some of these other parties? Clearly with DAPL, don't stop, right? Completely stop. You shouldn't be here. Go ahead.
I think with there's so many. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going with DAPL. With the DAPL, we're still on the front lines for that, and they have wanted to shut DAPL down. And there's Line 3, and there's all of an amazing advancement right now, where we think that Biden and Vice President Harris may actually do that, which is great. And then out of Standing Rock came the biggest solar panel farm in the U.S., right at Standing Rock. So that's their answer to what was happening there, was to create that. So that was amazing. But I mean, the shutting the pipeline, and eliminating the expansion of the pipeline in Line 3 is really where a lot of the leaders in Standing Rock are actually on the front lines right now doing that. So Standing Rock became a springboard for a lot of these young leaders that went from Standing Rock to follow the pipeline, and also to other frontline and organized peaceful resistance to that. But all around pipelines, oil, fracking, the environment.
It is what money
may I
power
just-
fears that people power,
I
right?
just wanted to
Yes,
I
absolutely.
just remind people that we are in a climate crisis where we're supposed to be, we're supposed to be transitioning powerfully out of fossil fuels. And so, to Michelle's point, that solar array that emerged out of that resistance is just a shining beacon, literally and figuratively, for how we ought to be thinking. Since Big was born in 2007, we've gone from 370 parts per million greenhouse gases, way past the blew past the tipping point, and now we're approaching 420, somewhere between 416, 419, and we have no vision of slowing that down with the amount of production that is continuing. So, yeah, I mean, we ought to be, yes, there ought to be fines. Yes, they ought to be cleaning up their own pollution. We got to put financial pressures on them. That's what they understand. It's got to be not a good business model, not so profitable, in the subsidies to fossil fuel and all of that, because we got to be investing all that energy into the new clean energy economy, not that old dead crap.
And find the
I think there's
people
also
who
like a really interesting thing that happens between environmental justice and public health, and especially in the case like here, where in District 15, where the burden of proof tends to be on communities to prove that they are getting sick or that they are getting harmed in some way, so that you can say, okay, 2,500 foot setback is legitimate, and we need this because otherwise everybody's getting cancer. But the thing is that you need data to prove that everybody is getting cancer. And is there a way to kind of leverage universities and all these long-term institutions to take the long-term data that's required to make these things, to show that the baseline is such? I mean, it's a little different in like Flint, Michigan, where you could literally see the before and after, whereas most situations that we find ourselves in don't have that. They're kind of like the industry was here, and then we realized that oil was bad next to communities. And then how do you kind of decouple that? So in a sense, I think like we need to be, to get away from these conversations about, job employment, the positive benefits of all these things that, industry brings into our neighborhoods. You do need to figure out that situation where it's like the onus is on local communities to show that this is worse than the positives that are gained from employment and other opportunities. And that's a struggle. It's employment versus cancer. Like, it's not a really fair comparison.
And very frequently, circling back to this idea of sacrifice zones, right? If this is a zone situation, so frequently we see it's not a single industry possibly, or a single company, right? Anjali, in the Wilmington area, I think the map showed there were 3 in Wilmington proper, but the area was actually impacted by 5, right? And so when the burden of proof is on a community to say, it's that one right there, it's nearly impossible, because which smokestack do you pick? Is it the diesel truck? Is it that one? Is it this other one? So this is what, again, makes it, I think, a difficult conversation for some folks to figure out where to jump into, because do you start with the redlining, right? And for those who are just becoming comfortable with ideas of structural racism, welcome to this film, and I encourage you to watch it a few more times, these films, because I think it helps really tease some of those pieces out. How did we get here? And then how did we let it happen for so long? How do we heal? And then to Naomi's point is, by the way, all the fire alarms are going on and we need to pivot so that we can thrive and make it out. So I'm really, really grateful for this feedback that you've all shared. And you really didn't need me. You guys bounced around with one another very, very well. I am curious. I'm happy to be here anytime. There is, of course, a great opportunity for action. To Naomi's point, we are absolutely in a critical moment as a species, as a society in this moment here, even in Chicago. There are lots of irons in the fire and lots of things that can happen. As thought leaders, as storytellers, as activists, what actions can people take to be part of the solution? And maybe the solution seems very narrow because we've just named that there are a lot of places, but tell us about what actions people can take.
I just want to say one real quick. Campaign finance reform, because these companies buy their legislators. And if there were rules that level the playing field about how people can get elected to government, and if they were strong, and if they were democratic, and if they were binding, we wouldn't have so many, mouthpieces for big oil and gas and fracking and coal in our legislatures. Get them out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we don't also want it to become solar just because it's solar, right? It's fundamentally, we shouldn't be able to buy that power and put communities at odds that way. Yeah. So everybody write that down. I'm sure you have a page of notes because these wonderful guests are sharing some gems. So that's one action even of itself. Were there other actions that others wanted to share?
Sure, I can go. I think that there are a couple things that I can think of just in terms of actions. One, I say this all the time, stepping into this role as an appointee and now someone who works in the public sector after a career of working in environmental justice, my job, my duty is to engage in this dialogue, even if it's a very hard conversation. We cannot compartmentalize our climate work from our environmental justice work. And that is a very uncomfortable space for a lot of folks, right? In the broader landscape of people that are doing sustainability work, it's our duty to dig in and to address this and to acknowledge that these environmental injustices are happening here in the city of Chicago. And it is our duty to work in coordination with communities to build these solutions. And so one of the things that I say as often as I can, even if it's so uncomfortable, to hold us accountable, right? We need folks to remind us of what is important, what is just, what is right. And it shouldn't take all of those things, but I think it's still important for people to continue to have a voice and to continue to let us know. And I'm grateful for folks every day. I have opportunities to work with frontline leaders, with people in the advocacy space, and just appreciate that push and that continued voice that you all have to make sure that the administration moves in the right direction, and would always encourage people to continue letter writing and tweeting and showing up to public processes, and to sending emails, right? And just being part of the dialogue. And I think that that's critically important. It's challenging, right? We don't always move at the pace that people would like to see. But I think it's still important, and it's still incredible piece of the fabric of the city for people to be holding us accountable and moving us in the right direction.
Lovely. Yeah. Join the dialogue. Absolutely. Gave a great number. You gave us some, I can hear the organizer in you, Angela. That was good. That was great. It was wonderful. Anjali and Michele, Do you have other actions you'd like to share with our audience?
I would say there's a lot of actions to happen with the pipelines, and a lot of the information can be found with Winona LaDuke's organization called Honor the Earth, and she's a great resource. They're a great resource to see petitions and direct actions if you can, and phone calls, tweeting. All kinds of different things for the pipeline, and also to understand the connection between these pipelines, have a direct connection to the murdered and missing Indigenous women, because they are directly with the man camps of the pipeline. So there's sex trafficking. So there's all of that to be done. And people can find out a lot on our website, on of the film, and also on Winona LaDuke's website, Honor the Earth. And you'd be surprised how much input, how much power you have just by tweeting and getting on social media and doing petitions, and then showing up to rallies and getting more information and more informed of what's going on. Because we're pushing the Biden administration right now, and it's working. So
stay encouraged. Absolutely. Join the fight. Anjali, you want to share?
I would just say Communities for a Better Environment, the NGO that is profiled in this film, is a great place to start for all of their coordinated actions. But I think the biggest call for me in general for this type of film is know what is local to you. Like, take care of your backyard, be a participant, be an actor, know that you are powerful, as is suggested by this film, and that you have work to do. And get involved, activate your community, and really know that you have an opportunity to change the world, and we need everybody. So if that's one message that could get across, that's the most important.
That's wonderful. That, I think, is a wonderful segue to a slide that actually has even more action steps, some that you've already shared. But for guests who are frantically writing down, don't worry, we will be able to share this with you, and you'll be able to check out the recording later too. But I think there are some fantastic calls on here to use your voice in the bottom right-hand corner, right? There are some pieces, some links there that Michele, Anjali, and Angela even mentioned. We have the top right, live lightly on the earth, right? Protect people and the planet, do good. There is work to be done, and we need all hands on deck. Drawdown is a wonderful resource to truly look at this climate crisis and solutions from top to bottom. There are places that are really fine, as well as rather big, for you to research, to understand, to get familiar with, and to take action. On the top left, I'd be sadly like not an employee with Sierra Club if I didn't simply encourage us to get outside, right? Even to Anjali's point about protect our backyard. Here in Chicago, we have a wonderfully large city, a diverse city, and we are no stranger to some of these issues. So I encourage you to get out, see what we have going on in the city, follow organizations who are truly leading this work, and then get ready to roll up your sleeves. We encourage you to also just communicate and learn. There's a lot to learn. Sometimes it's important to take that step before just diving right in. And I think there are some fantastic thought partners and organizations that have been mentioned on this call to do that. To stay informed, we encourage you to check out more resources from WBEZ. The Environmental Law and Policy Center have some fantastic resources related to protecting public lands as well. And of course, that people power is how we stand up to that money power that sometimes, confuses things. But let us not forget the power that is of the people. All right. Well, we hope that you've truly enjoyed this afternoons, these screenings this afternoon. We encourage you to take any of these actions, but continue to follow One Earth Film Festival on Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook at One Earth FF. And be sure to share with your family and friends something you've learned from today's screening, whether it was in the films or just as part of this conversation. These conversations are important to the film festival's process and structure. And even though we are virtual, we are so grateful that you've joined us to be a part of it. I want to extend a deep, sincere thank you to all of our incredible panelists, Anjali, Michele, Anjali with District 15, Michele Noble from Reclamation, Naomi Davis with Blacks in Green, and then of course, Angela Tovar, our Chief Sustainability Officer here in Chicago. Thank you for all that you bring to this conversation. Thank you for how you are pushing this conversation to be more than just the hot new technology, but really about justice and the people and the land. So I look forward to seeing more pieces from each of you, whether it's a program or another film. I hope that we can feature your work in the future. All right, I'm going to now ask our audience to keep the comments coming. You can raise applause, give us our virtual emoji if you would like, or some thumbs up or some claps. I also would love to hear how you are inspired today. So in the chat box, as we wrap up, I ask you to finish this sentence. I am ready to make and inspire change by what? What are you going to get out there and do? What are you going to get out there and make? Who are you going to inspire? I look forward to seeing those come through in the chat. This is wonderful. So good. We really hope that you've enjoyed this afternoon. And I believe there's maybe one more film tonight. But again, follow us at One Earth Film Festival on all social platforms. As we close out, I really do hope that you've got a sense of One Earth's 10th year theme of inspiring change. There's a wonderful lineup, and today, definitely, I'm so happy that we're on this last day because these pieces were powerful. And this is a theme that we've seen in the film, in the discussion, and we hope that you'll continue it in all the cities that you all are living in. If you would, we'd love for you to throw into the chat all these ideas. What are you compelled to do? What are you inspired to do as well? All right. Do I see some coming in? Yes. I'm ready. This is from Anna. I'm ready to make an inspired change by being here today and hugged many trees today. Absolutely. Janice is inspired to take a walk in the forest preserve and continue to pick up the detritus. Absolutely. Love it. Amy is ready to get to work for environmental justice. Sounds good, Amy. We look forward to seeing you out and about in the social media space, in the forest preserves, in the City Hall Council meetings, ready to reading your comments. All right, folks, we really appreciate you joining us today. And keep those inspiring comments coming. We love to share them, and we'll be able to share it out with you all also. To learn more about our panelists, we encourage you to stay in touch with their work. Check out the links on this slide. There's information for everybody that was part of the presentation today. Remember to tweet, repost, and share what your experience has been like with the One Earth Film Festival, and make sure to celebrate 10 years. Give them a nice some confetti. And if you have found value in today's event and this entire week of programming, I encourage you to donate to One Earth Film Festival and join us for other events in the future. Some are even coming up as soon as April. So we encourage you to join us for Earth Week and for other programming throughout the year. Last but not least, of course, a huge thank you to our panelists, our tech team, all of those behind the scene with One Earth Film Festival, but to the viewers. This would not be possible, and it wouldn't be much of a party to celebrate such a fantastic program and organization if you weren't here. So let's all give ourselves and our program participants one final round of applause. We thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Okay, well, we hope to see you soon at our final screening of the festival. And again, I think we all know that it's daylight savings time, but in case some folks are some late risers and they have to catch this film, give them a nudge. All right, thank you again to our panelists. It is great to join you all this evening. Take care.